sellers don't want to be sold to. Quite frankly, nobody wants to be sold to. I've even heard some people say that sales is basically just bad marketing, and the list goes on. So I just returned from the Helium 10 Sale and Scale Summit, and there was a lot of energy there at the conference over in Vegas at the Virgin Hotel. They even had Gary Vee headline the events or do the final keynote speech. So Neil Patel showed up. We had lots and lots of people doing things. We even had Bradley from Helium 10 run a Zumba class. I learned that he actually has the Guinness World Record for largest Zumba class ever. Just a lot of cool and interesting things. They even had Nelly at the conference. 1,000 people showed up to this thing. And the reason we know those numbers is because they had this app as part of the conference called Whova. I've got a lot of takeaways from the conference I'll share today, but first, here is the leaderboard. You can see once that zooms in there, yours truly won the #1 slots. I actually took away the door prize, if as it were, first place on the leaderboard for Sale and Scale Summit 2022. And basically what that means is that on the social app, I was the most engaged. However, I have to note here that the mechanism for how the winner was chosen was purely based on the number of comments you make. So instead of seeing lots of hundreds of different sellers engaging the posts, it basically became a fest between me and some other agency and thought leaders in the space. Not necessarily the most value-added conversation going on. Now, when I first started to engage the app, what was really interesting is that this was going live before the conference. So it was like having a conference before the conference. This has really not been done before in the Amazon community. We had lots of different people making comments and threads. I was trying to do posts like PPC tips and SEO tips, and by the end of the event, there very much was just the booth operator saying, "Come visit my booth." It was not value-added content towards the end. But what I really liked about the concept, even though the execution of it needed a couple of modest rule changes to make it execute better, what I really liked about it was the fact that it was the beginning of the morphing between the digital and the physical worlds. You can go to a digital conference right now and learn lots of things. You can go to Gary Vee's YouTube channel and hear a bunch of stuff, but you really can't get the same feel and look to it like I had when I attended the conference and I'm 6 feet away from Gary Vee asking a question in front of the 1,000 people at the conference. There's just nothing like it. It's very different and interesting. So when I was at the conference, I just felt a bunch of energy, and this digital app not only had all of the events, it showed you where to go and how to get there with maps and all those typical logistic items, but it also gave us the ability to ask questions, right? So in the past, where we've seen, you ask questions on Twitter or you ask questions in a conference app before, it really just never got seen the light of day. But this is the beginning of where I saw some hope here. So there was going to be an event about how to increase your PPC, or they had the word tacos in the thread title. So I spent 4 hours writing PPC Tacos jokes, right? And that's the level of engagement that you've never seen at a conference before. And some of these were fairly decent. Such as, how many PPC ingredients go into a PPC taco strategy? What is your favorite taco? Walk me through your PPC strategy and tell me which part of the taco it relates to, soft shell or hard shell. Which PPC format would be best described as a burrito and why? How many ingredients go into a proper PPC tacos? Let us hear about your newest PPC strategy. When you need to ground down your ACOS, what's the first thing you should do besides lower your tacos intake, right? Just on and on and on, right? Some of these are not as good as others, of course. But the fact is that there was engagement. Now, I was a little let down that most of the speakers at the conference did not check the app. They didn't engage with the questions that were left there. And I felt like that was a pretty lost and major opportunity. The other disappointing fact is because the scoring mechanism of the app was built in such a way to reward comments, people would make threads like this. And they would say, this is a thread about X, and then they would make 38 replies to themselves. And of course, talking to yourself in a social app is pretty insane, right? Like, why would anybody engage you or engage that? It doesn't make a lot of sense. So the sellers who are looking at this and they're logging into this app and they see 1,000 notifications for questions and stuff like that on the app, and they're just like, well, why would I even want to touch this? And so what do? They bail. They didn't engage it, right? And that's, I think that's the biggest lost opportunity. So Helium 10 went out to try and get about 2,000 people, sellers that is, to show up at this conference. Now, they didn't win that, and there was a lot of different conferences. There was Accelerate just the week before, Surge the week before that. There were so many conferences. We also had one over in Australia, a big one over there, and so that was not necessarily a target that they could have hit, but they did make it a marquee event. The stakes are high at a marquee event because they probably spent well over $3 million putting this thing on. And that's not an exaggeration. I mean, think about it this way. Gary Vee's speaker fee probably cost them $150,000, $200,000. Probably cost them $50,000 or $100,000 to rope in Neil Patel. And the list goes on. They have the hotel and the food and all of these different scenarios. And they charge, a significant chunk of change for booths to show up. But the problem with that is the sellers never want to be sold to. So how many sellers go engage the boost? Well, that number is diminishing. The ROI then becomes a problem. Will the boost come back next time? And so forth, right? And so the sellers who are coming to see speakers and events often end up receiving infomercials. And the app was like this opportunity to prevent that. And the way that they could have fixed it is made it a little bit more like Reddit, right? Like where you couldn't score points after, or you couldn't make a reply to a thread for 10 minutes. And if that had been done, we might have seen a little bit more of a level playing field, because for me to win that social app contest, I had to put 20 hours into it, right? Like, and I'll never touch the app again, which is kind of a weird thing, right? 20 hours into a social experiment that I'll never touch again, just so I could win this silly death crystal Rick and Morty meme there in the making, right? And so, and again, I hated what I was doing while I was doing it. I was trying to figure out how to engage people, tag sellers, create events, and do all those things. Now, the one thing I really liked about the app is as you're going around and meeting people in the community, you had a full list of all the attendees. Right, so there was 1,093 attendees. You can see right there. I don't know if all 1,000 actually showed up. I assume most did. But in here, you could scroll through the attendees. You could click on a random one like this. So let's say I wanted to talk to this person here. I could click the exchange contact information. I could message them through the app. So as I met people through the conference, I was able to immediately go to the app and engage them. And what I found is that most sellers that I was engaging, because I was basically being approached by people as I was going through the conference, I'd say like, hey, you want me to look at your listing? And I'd immediately say, hey, here's the things that I would do with this. Here are the common trends that I saw. Hey, there's not enough humanization in your photos. You're not showing me your customer avatar. You may understand who your demographics are, but you don't know who is the perfect customer. Where is that 3-time divorced truck driver on your listing? What is the actual customer avatar that you could connect with? I also saw many listings that didn't have their brand story up yet. So if you go to a listing like Age of Sage like this is what a brand story can look like. And notice how I can scroll to the right. I can click on different products. And it's just a huge opportunity. And I love the fact that you get horizontal territory with the brand story. And then with the A+ content, this is premium A+ content, which is brand new. Notice how gigantic the photos can become with premium A+ content. You get different types of modules here, and you can scroll down and see a lot of content. The product grid's a little bit different. You can click on different products here and go off to the races and try and do different things. This item's not even a year old, and it's already got 1,100 reviews, which is kind of neat. So we had lots of opportunity to meet sellers. There were new blood coming to the conference, people who had never been to a conference before. But I made this poll on LinkedIn, and I said, hey, I just attended Sale and Scale and Amazon's conference by Helium 10. Found it very worthwhile. but the number of sellers attending even this well-advertised and headline event by keynote speakers like Gary Vee was low for the target that they were trying to hit. While 1,000 people were at the event, it was far short of the 2,000 sellers H10 was chasing when it made the event. And because it cost $3 million, I was just wondering, do sellers get enough knowledge and networking out of attending an event? Are there too many events, or have sellers decided to go without because of high airplane ticket costs? What do you think? So the poll I asked, Amazon conferences are worth attending in person? Yes, 52% said yes, 19% say no, and 29% say they've never attended. And we had over 200 people vote on this so far. We have many people engaging in this post that were involved in the conference, including the CEO of Helium 10. And I actually thought he made a very good metaphor here, talking about, does a wheel need to be round? It doesn't have to be, but if it is, it makes hauling the load a little bit easier. I thought that was a great metaphor on how the conference can add that sort of value. And there was some engagement here that I thought was very interesting. And so obviously the industry is very young, but the fact is I'm interested to know why more sellers aren't attending, right? I went to the Surge event. There were less than 100 sellers there. I went to the Powwow event. There was maybe 100 sellers there. And a very heavy amount of booths selected at the Powwow event especially. Obviously, Helium 10 put on a very great event, very positive outlook of my participation in it. This is just me trying to figure out, how do we get more sellers engaged? Because I think it's important to engage sellers. I think it's important to add that value. Antonio, who was at the event, says, I think the main issue with most events is they become too commercial, all talk being too pitchies. And this is mostly because they're dominated by sponsors and service providers who, albeit being indispensable to the very existence of the event, need to understand that the content needs to stop being about them and their services, but rather be about sellers and their needs. Otherwise, sellers will soon lose interest in events. There'll be nobody left to pitch to who wants to travel and pay to watch infomercials all day. So we gotta figure out how to offer value, and this is the summary of how I feel about it too. Sellers just don't want to be sold to. The thing about these types of events, conferences, Amazon being one of them, is that the convention can bring 100 times the ROI. It can be a bit high variance, but if you plan and are open to networking, I found it very worthwhile. Realistic sellers don't need the shows to succeed. The resources are available everywhere, are more than they are focused on seller needs for their goals. There are things people can get from shows for sure, but the shows are much more optional than necessary. So I kind of talked, if I ever put on an event myself, I'd probably invite 100 sellers and just go into accounts like a working session. But Abe rightfully labels that as more of a mastermind than a show. I'll probably never put a show on by that definition. The event was not even 1 week after Accelerate, so it might be a budget or planning issue, says Anthony. Heard a lot of sellers show do Accelerate. Paul Walsh says, great question. Succeeding without shows is possible for sure. In my experience, 85% of a material at a show is information that doesn't add value to me. If someone managed to reduce this wastage and improve the content, even if the show had to be smaller, then I would find it much harder to miss shows. So I'm curious, guys, what kind of content would you want to see at an Amazon conference? What would you find of value? Key says, I was hesitant due to travel costs and the way it was advertised as scale-up throwdown. A lot of people I talked to felt like it seemed more like it was going to be a party than a learning event. They did have Nelly throw down a party, that's for sure. Emma says there needs to be more international events, in my opinion. I'm in the UK. I would love to have attended this conference, but the time and the costs involved could not be justified, not at this time of year. Quite frankly, we just had the Australian events. I'm very much aware of a bunch of mastermind type of 100 seller events over in Europe. This comment rubbed me a little bit wrong. This one came from Adam Chavez. I don't know if I said that right. One of our principles for our events, this is a VP of strategy over at Helium 10, was to drive extreme value. I very much love that statement. That's a great statement. I did not want sellers to break even on this. I wanted 10x, 100x ROI. So we focused on networking and a content series that didn't try to be everything to everyone, but focused on private label and brand builders as the unique challenges there. And that would make perfect sense. Obviously, this is exactly what I would expect in a seller event like this. Very much what you would expect to see at a Prosper type of event. So nothing challenging there. I think it would be challenging to have a small scale event while achieving those goals, but it'd be necessary for events to play a role in the future of our industry. So I foresee more marquee events. I actually do not foresee more marquee events, and that's because it's very difficult to get the 1,000 to 2,000 sellers to show up there and make a profit, right? You're not going to be able to do that without booths, that's for sure. I'm really happy to hear you found it worthwhile, Steve. I don't consider you an easy person to please. So here's where I'm just like, okay, why are we making those comments? Not 100% sure. But, obviously where I'm trying to come from at this angle is how do we add maximum value to the sellers? This is the heart of the polling question. How do we get more sellers to come to events? How do we engage more sellers? Obviously, I win out of a situation like this because I get to meet people who've never heard about me. Obviously, it's also great because then we can have communities meet together. There's a lot of exchange of information. Agencies can team up, networking, partnerships, all sorts of value. Adam goes on to say, I'll chalk worthwhile as a win. Looking forward to reviewing the attendee feedback in full, and congrats on the leaderboard win. It was wonderful having you there and seeing your engagement with the event and the app. But I kind of retort here just a little bit. I don't think you need to please me, Adam. We need to please the sellers. Your event success will be the same with or without me and any of the seller agencies, thought leaders, etc. You don't need me. If anything, I need you. So I'm always trying to find out how to add more value to sellers. This is me genuinely trying to find out how to. It's not me against you. It's all of us against Amazon. So this is just kind of me unpacking some of the events here. We had a lot of people come and experience it together. A lot of great speaking, a lot of great engagements. Hundreds of vendors and partners and booths were set up and engaged. And quite frankly, it's an opportunity to do exactly what the event is called, and that is to sell more and scale. And so I think a lot of people are going to walk away from the event having that networking opportunity and figuring out some logistics and some hurdle overcoming and some nice good nuggets. And so to those that haven't attended an event before, I'm very interested to hear, what would it take to get you to go to an event like this? Is it geography? Is it cost? Is it the plane ticket cost? Is it just the value of the topic? Who puts it on? Let me know in the comments section, because I think this is a very great experiment that was just conducted, especially with the digital app of Whova connecting into the conference especially. And let's see what else comes about from this. My name is Stephen Pope. I'm the founder of My Amazon Guy, and I'm the winner of the Sale and Scale Leaderboard. And I want to hear more from you. Thanks, guys.